Welcome home. We are WNST, AM 1570, Towson, Baltimore, and Baltimore Positive. We have been discussing the aftermath of the Key Bridge tragedies. I was in Florida with Luke Jones. Luke Jones is about to join us here to discuss baseball and opening day and lots of things that certainly you and I spent the day together on Tuesday, but we're going to be spending some Fridays together at Fadley's downtown. I'm wearing my Costas shirt because Costas is on the peninsula that is now literally the road to nowhere, right? Like, and it's going to be that way for years to come. We're all trying to settle in on that, and I want to go down there. We're going to support them as we record this on Wednesday night, but we're going to be there on April 9th, kicking off the Maryland Crab Cake Tour. We're going to probably start a little earlier in the morning. At 2 o'clock, the Orioles play the Red Sox. I'm going to summon Luke Jones to Dundalk that day. Not only talk baseball, we're going to watch the game. The Orioles are playing the Red Sox 2 o'clock. Going to put it on the bar, go old school in Dundalk on April 9th and support Costas with our Maryland Crab Cake Tour. I'll have lottery tickets to give away, and we'll probably have a whole lot more clarity by April 9th on all issues of the Key Bridge. We'll certainly have clarity on the issues of the Orioles and not on the Ravens, who ran for me in the middle of the night. If you see Eric DeCosta, remind him that he ran from me with Steve Bisciotti the other night. Luke joins me now. Hey, look, man, it's opening day. The weather, by the time people hear this, the game might be Friday. I don't know, right? But we got to talk Key Bridge before we do anything. I'm 7 hours into doing radio without you because you didn't want to get out of bed early in the morning after 6 days of running around and civic tragedies, and Peter Angelos died, and we got opening day all day Thursday, or maybe not there. I don't know. But you and I ran you ragged. You ran yourself ragged at the NFL owners meetings. We'll talk about all of that. We're going to get to all of that. We're going to talk about opening day rosters and Corbin Burns and the Angels and probably Ohtani betting. I don't think we even talked about that. We talked about everything, but it was sort of just at ballparks and in cars and rides and all that stuff. The Key Bridge thing, I want to give you some oxygen because they say you're from Pennsylvania, but deep down your family's East Baltimore.
Yeah, I mean, my dad grew up in Essex. My aunt lived over on that side of town. My grandparents lived there. We've talked about establishments on that side of town, like Costas Inn, for example, that I've certainly enjoyed over the years. And I mean, the tragedy itself, the individuals who lost their lives, what this is going to mean for the city, and so many challenges it's going to create, as it goes without saying. But I mean, for me, you think of visuals of Baltimore, and I'm not going to say the Key Bridge was at the top of the list, but it's certainly ranked up there, right? I mean, you're talking about something that, is Baltimore, and especially that side of town. And I can think of being on boats with relatives and going under the Key Bridge, over the years at different times, on family outings and whatnot. And I mean, I don't have anything overly profound to say, Nestor, about it that hasn't been offered by so many thoughtful individuals over these last recent days. But, my thoughts are with anyone directly impacted, and specifically the families of those who lost their lives. But I mean, it's just, it's sad. It's sad. And it's one of those, when, we were waking up very early Tuesday morning as I was getting ready to head over to the last day of the NFL owners meetings, and to see the images on social media, to see the coverage on cable news, a national story, while not being at home, not being in the greater Baltimore area at that point in time. It's just very, very sad, very shocking. And it's certainly going to bring a lot of challenges in the coming days, weeks, months, and even years, potentially. But I think we know this is a very resilient area, and I'd like to think that from a long-term perspective, Baltimore will come out more than okay in the long run. But boy, it definitely hurts. There's no question.
Well, we'll be down at Costas April 9th. We'll be talking Oriole baseball. I don't know what kind of start we expect them to get off to. We don't even know how the weather is. But I do know that at 12:35 on Wednesday afternoon, when I was literally talking about the life of Peter Angelos, literally, we were discussing Peter Angelos' life and his legacy, my phone went off with you sending the Baltimore Positive text that David Rubenstein had purchased the Orioles, that it had been unanimously approved by Major League Baseball. The bridge, the national anthem, our role in the O in the national anthem, and their role in the Orioles, and everything we've ever known the Orioles to be for the last 31 years is about to change dramatically. And for that, I'm just glad to be alive. I mean, like literally to see this and to see, as I've said several times, and I'll say this to David Rubenstein when I meet him, there's pure potentiality here, for what it can become. Same thing with the Key Bridge. There's potentiality here. I began my day with Bill Cole. I wish I had my Cole Roofing cup here. I'm usually having coffee when I'm with you. Uh, at this point, I'm having. I've cried 3 times on the air today. Janet Marie got me going. Tom Lavera got me going. Leonard Raskin got me going about my Uncle Norman riding me across the Key Bridge as a little boy. And the baseball thing, when this national anthem is played, when Cal Ripken comes out and waves and says, I'm a part of this, which obviously was very important to Rubenstein, even talking about that on Tuesday night in the first words he said. Um, you know, all that being said, there's something really crazy about this week. This is going to be an all-timer kind of a week. Whether they get the game off in good conditions, bad conditions, the game gets punted on by the time people hear this. Whatever happens here, something's about to happen that we're all going to report on here at WNST. You're going to be on the inside. I might be wherever I am. That's going to hopefully feel different than the way it was.
No question. And there's a lot of excitement, through some of the obvious challenges this week. Opening day always brings optimism. Whether the team's coming off of a 101 win season or some of these 100-loss seasons, there's still always that a certain feeling about opening day. So I think that's going to be good. As you mentioned, weather and all that, it's going to happen whether it's Thursday, Friday, whatever. But there's just so much optimism. And we've talked about this for 2 months. I mean, the idea that literally, as you and I are speaking in real time right now, 2 months ago, this hadn't been reported just yet. Certainly, it was in the works at that point, but it hadn't become public knowledge. And to think how quickly this has moved, I think speaks to the excitement of it. I think it speaks to Major League Baseball wanting to be turning the page as it relates to Orioles ownership and the Angelos family and all of that. But there's just, and I wrote it the when this news initially broke and when the Orioles made the initial announcement that this had been agreed to in principle pending baseball approval, which came on Wednesday. It's being able to dream of the bar being elevated, not just a little bit, but substantially. And that's exciting when you're talking about where this team is on the field right now. And I think for all the words that we're going to hear from the new ownership group, hearing a statement that flat out says we want to advance a world-class professional sports agenda with eyes on returning a World Series trophy to Baltimore. I can think back to various times, even times when things were good over the last decade. And I'm going to say the last decade plus because that's when I've been covering the team. But I can remember Dan Duquette talking about competitive baseball, the postseason. I can remember John Angelos at a couple points where he wasn't necessarily saying something to embarrass himself, but just talking about the team in general, talking about being competitive and talking about the playoffs. But I always felt like there was a reluctance to say the words World Series at different points from those in leadership in this organization. And that's not to say it never came up, but there was just always something to that. And maybe it's because it's something I haven't seen in my lifetime other than when I was literally a 2-week-old infant when the Orioles last won the World Series. But to hear the new owner, someone in this position of power and influence and the control person for the Orioles to say that he has eyes on returning this franchise to a World Series for the first time in over 40 years. I mean, that's exciting.
By the way, not to interrupt, but the most important thing that I saw here, professionalism, integrity, excellence, and a fierce desire to win games. But let's start with professionalism and integrity. Those were two things that, again, Peter's been dead 5 days. Professionalism and integrity professionalism and integrity. After the other billionaire owner ran down a dark hallway away from me with his general manager when they saw me. Professionalism and integrity. That's all. And accountability. I'll throw that in there. He feels like he's already accountable. He's out in front of it, right? Like, so I am that's the part that's going to create the excellence and the ability to win games. The professionalism and the integrity were always lacking, and at heart, they didn't win for 40 years. So professional, on top of everything else, you got to be great at a lot of things, and a lot of things you got to be lucky and all that. But professionalism and integrity, that's going to see you through. That's going to see you through. That's going to see Steve Bisciotti through the 4-13s and the 5-12s, and it's going to see this owner here through maybe a championship, maybe some disappointments. Probably, not probably, definitely some disappointments. It's sports. You're not going to win every year. There's going to be good and bad, but professionalism and integrity. Can I trust you? And are you giving me a real effort? And are you giving me an honest effort? And as Charlie Ekman would say, and I want to invoke his name today, are you a right guy, leader? Are you a right guy? Because if you're a right guy, you have professionalism and integrity. And the excellence comes after that. It always has in my life.
Yeah, I mean, I think, and look, at the end of the day, we're talking about words. Whether we're talking about the statement that the Orioles and Rubenstein put out, or we're talking about the press conference, interviews he's going to do, here at the very beginning, as his tenure is just beginning. Ultimately, the proof's going to be in the pudding, and actions speak louder than words. But I think where he is at such an advantage is on the field with where things are. That certainly helps. Now, we've talked about the other challenges: TV, ticket sales, cultivating business partnerships in the local community, all of those, the stadium renovations. I mean, obviously there's already, with some of the initial press that he's done, the ground lease issue and what's going to become of that. And clearly that's something he's interested in doing. And we heard plenty of that from John Angelos. What's going to make sense in terms of what's feasible, what can be done that's financially responsible, but also done in a way that shows some vision and some development and things that could be very positive for the Camden Yards Sports Complex. But we know that there are challenges to that, as far as space constraints and parking and all that. Same things we were talking about with John Angelos, just you're hoping with a new group in place goes back to what you were just saying: integrity and professionalism and being forthcoming about things and transparency. And hey, what's your vision here and how can it happen? And how can this all mesh together to be something that makes sense, that yes, profitable for the ownership group, but it goes back to being a good steward and stewardship and making sure that this is going to make sense for not just Orioles fans, but for the city and the state. So there's so much there, but I think they're coming in at a time where there are challenges, no doubt, but they've got a lot going for them, and that's because of the work that Mike Elias and his group and the baseball operations side have done over the last 5 years. So it's really exciting. There are a lot of questions that need to be asked, and I think it's very clear we're not going to get answers to them right away. I think this is going to be something that over the next 6 months to maybe 2 years we'll start to really get a vision about what this group is all about. But in the meantime, again, raising the bar, being in a spot where you can dare to dream about this being great. And I've used the example to you over and over again, and I'll continue to, because I think it's not a perfect comparison, but I think it's an appropriate comparison. I'll continue to go back to the St. Louis Cardinals. I mean, this is where Mike Elias and Sig Mejdal originated. They came from the Cardinals to the Astros years and years ago, but St. Louis is not a big market. St. Louis as a city has its challenges, and I'm not, it's Midwest versus the East Coast. I'm not trying to say that they're identical twins with Baltimore by any stretch of the imagination, but I think you have a market, you have a city that is not the Yankees, is not the Mets, is not the Los Angeles Dodgers, is not the Boston Red Sox. Well, it's not the Philadelphia Phillies in terms of market size, but you see what can be done when you have good ownership, good baseball ops, a good vision of what you want to do on the field and off. I mean, St. Louis baseball as a baseball city, its reputation speaks for itself over the years. And you look at the success they've had over the last 20 years, and that is with a payroll that's been competitive and at times has been, kind of in that top 10 range. And at times it's been a little bit lower than that, but spending that makes sense, coupled with a good farm system and a commitment to player development and using all of your resources wisely, their results over the last 2 decades speak for themselves. So that's where I've looked at this thing and said, if there's something the Orioles could aspire to, and again, I understand you think big picture in terms of a lot of the aspects off the field, but it all relates to what happens on the field ultimately. I mean, it's a give take in that regard, but I see a franchise like that that's had the success they've had, multiple championships, so many playoff appearances over the last 20 years. I see no reason why the Orioles, now with a new ownership group in place that you hope will follow through with all the things we're seeing in the initial statements, that this thing could be great, and this thing could be great for a long time. And I mean, for you consider not just the last 30 years under the Angelos family, but even going back to the late 80s and early 90s before then. I mean, it's been a long time since the Orioles have been viewed as one of the model organizations in Major League Baseball. You go back to the early 80s. I mean, 40 plus years at this point. So just to even be having this conversation with these thoughts of what they can aspire to become, coupled with where they already are going on the field right now, I mean, it's really exciting. And I think anyone who cares about Baltimore is, whether you're a huge baseball person or whether you're more on the casual side of that, I mean, it's tough not to look at this thing and say, wow, there is a great opportunity here, but there are a lot of issues that they are going to have to take care of here over the next couple of years.
He is Luke Jones. He is Baltimore Luke. I see this 11 a.m. press conference. I mean, literally, Luke, I'm not on their press releases, and I see that there's been a press release. We've been here working all day, and talking to and seeing so many quotes from Rubenstein, seeing all of the early social media. And look, we're an hour into this. This happened an hour as we're speaking. There will be more words, more things. I'm sure, the situation with the Key Bridge, the city was in a state of emergency. It is in a state of emergency. Transportation, we had all sorts of issues going on here. And the weather but this is something that has been in the works for months. We've waited a lifetime for all of this stuff. And then there's the hope on the field, right? Then there's the last minute picking up a guy that's won some games in October to add to the edge of the roster, to take all of that drama out of Jackson Holiday and, who's making the team and, Colton Wong and like all of these baseball things that will sit underneath of this. There's a little less oxygen for all that. It's like, well, if you lose on opening day, no big deal, whatever. This is going to be a really, really good baseball team, whether they win or lose on opening day, this week, next week, whatever. The Masson thing will probably be screwed up for a while. I might not even get a press pass back. I don't know. I don't know how any of this is going to go, but I do know the baseball team's going to be good. And the baseball team every day, for baseball people, they're going to roll the ball out there. And this guy came in, I mean, 48 hours after the biggest tragedy in the history of the city, right? Like, I mean, there's just a lot of weird stuff. Cal Ripken, I mean, trying to get inertia for a press conference and this and that amongst all of it. But the long play for the baseball team is this is good. They're into something here that's a daily drama that can really bring people together at a time when this, in a way, the Angelos family could never react. They didn't react well to Freddie Gray, right? We've had this thing happen with the bridge now that the team has some daylight here, that they're going to have the stage. Maybe that's why the Costa and Bisciotti ran from me the other night. Hey, the stage is the Orioles now for a while, because it really is. The stage is the Orioles for a while.
It is. And I mean, we're still, about a month away from the draft, which we know that's a tentpole event for the NFL and in turn with the Ravens. But I mean, the Orioles have a great opportunity here. Let's start with the schedule, just on a very basic level. I won't go into it too deep here, but Angels, then 3 with Kansas City. Then they go to Pittsburgh for 3. Then they go to the Red Sox for 3, which I don't know.
These are 4 of the worst teams in the sport, literally, right?
I mean, and look, I'm not saying the Red Sox are going to lose 98 games, but I think you poll most people think they're going to be last place in the AL East, and we'll see what happens. I mean, it's not as though the AL East, each team has some question marks. Even the Orioles and the Rays, who were right at the top of the division last year. But then Milwaukee, Minnesota. So it does pick up a little bit as the month goes on. But I just rattled off those first 12 games. I mean, the Orioles have a chance here to, I'm not saying go 12-0, but if you win 4 series, you're off to a 9-3, 8-4 kind of start. I mean, right off the bat, boom, there you go. You're probably in first place at that point in time, and just you're off to a good start. If they don't get off to that start, it doesn't mean the season's over or to panic, but it is an opportunity here, especially with what you're talking about. Some of the just the feelings of everything that's happened this week that is much bigger, much more important than baseball, but sports are an escape, right? Sports are a release. I mean, this is a chance for the Orioles when there was already so much optimism, but now you have a real life event and a tragedy here impacting the community. This is an opportunity for them to, get off to a good start and just give people something to be even more excited about. And I think that's going to be so much fun. I mean, seeing Corbin Burns start opening day, when you talk about having a legitimate ace, for the first time since Mike Messina, at least in terms of how he's regarded, arguably the best pitcher in the National League over the last 4 or 5 years. So, I mean, there's so much excitement. I mean, there's questions, and you mentioned some of the roster stuff, and when's Jackson Holiday going to arrive? We'll see. Certainly that's going to be a watch for the first couple months of the season. And what about the rest of the rotation? Where's Kyle Bradish? Where's John Means? Bullpen, I've talked a lot about the bullpen. I don't love this bullpen, if I'm being totally honest, but there are other aspects of this team to really, really love and to really be optimistic about. And I was even looking at this as I'm kind of working on some beginning of the season writing at BaltimorePositive.com. I think for every question that you might have about the Orioles, look at the Rays. I mean, they traded Glass now. Their rotation injuries from last year, they are still dealing with the effects. The Wander Franco saga and whether he's ever going to play for them again, let alone anytime soon. Blue Jays, I mean, Toronto, what's the best thing you could say about their offseason? Okay, they got Justin Turner, but probably the thing you'd say they were most known for is they tried to get Shohei Ohtani, but they didn't get him. Yankees, okay, they got Juan Soto. Great. They got Marcus Stroman, but Garrett Cole's on the shelf. They have all these old guys at this point that they're looking to bounce back from. They've got a good ceiling, but their floor, as we saw last year, is still pretty low, relative to the Yankees anyway. And we already mentioned Boston. So even if you're of the opinion, and this is where I do lean right now, I mean, the Orioles haven't had 100-win seasons back to back since 79 and 1980. I think it's a tall order to win 100 games. I mean, Captain Obvious statement there. I get it. So even if I don't necessarily see this team winning 101 games again or 103 games again, 94 wins, looking at this division, or 95 wins with how competitive it is, but also with none of these teams being flawless or perfect, I think that still could very easily win this division. So I still like the Orioles to win the division, but there are some question marks, and a lot of that for me falls on the pitching side. So that's okay. Other teams in the division have questions too. So buckle up. It's the start of a long season. As we mentioned, you hope to get off to a good start here, given the schedule, but it's a long season. They can go 10-2 and the rest of the year not go great, or they could go 5-5 and then they're awesome after that. I mean, it really is baseball. So
it'll be fun to be talking about
this
every day.
And I think, yeah. I mean, right. Exactly. I mean, it's just, there's such a sense of, and again, especially on the heels of what's happened this week in Baltimore, there's just such a sense of excitement and optimism. And for me, again, even when the Orioles were good over the last, going back to the Duquette and Buck era, going back to this time last year with the optimism as far as coming off of the good second half of 22 that they had, there was always the caveat of what? What about ownership? What about when they're ready to go out and augment this roster? Is ownership going to have the willingness, the wherewithal, the intestinal fortitude, the integrity, whatever you want to, however you wanted to frame it, to go out and make this thing good to great. And now it's an unknown. Again, we don't know what this is going to look like ultimately, but knowing what it's looked like for the last 30 years, I don't know how you can't look at this and be really, really excited about the possibilities surrounding the Baltimore Orioles, even with some of the questions and challenges that certainly need to be addressed more so off the field at this point in time.
He is Luke Jones. He is Baltimore Luke. We'll have plenty more to say about the Key Bridge tragedy, plenty more to say about the Orioles, plenty more to say about new ownership, and probably a whole lot less to say about Peter Angelos and John Angelos and Free the Birds and the Peter Principles, which I ran the other day. People were asking why. It's because I was on a plane and the Key Bridge fell, and it was the last chance to sort of run it. It was planned. So if you were offended by that, my apologies. I don't aim to offend. I just do. Hey, put that on my tombstone. But in the end with Peter Angelos, we talked about it the other day, and this new thing will feel like a new thing right away. And the healing part of what sports can be in baseball, I hope it sort of comes to life in some way here in the coming weeks and months as we rally together over the Key Bridge tragedies and really rally around a new owner and at least from the front side. And I'm 2 hours and 13 minutes past the WNST text that came to me on Wednesday afternoon talking about professionalism and integrity. And, I prayed a long time for this, Luke Jones. So we're on to a new day, and I'll see you at Camden Yards. I am Nestor. We are WNST AM 1570. Dallas and Baltimore. We never stop talking Baltimore positive.